We've got Shades,
Hello.
Emmanuel,
Hello.
and Ryan.
Hello.
What was your first impression, and have you read this before?
I read it long ago before Emmanuel and Ryan were born, and then I read it yesterday. It was, relatively primitive. You could see a lot of it was similar to Stan Lee's Tales of Suspense and Tales to Astonish. If you read those, you can kind of see the world that you're suddenly engulfed in.
No, I have not read it before. This was my first time reading it. My first impression was it was kind of basing it off of the movie and kind of comparing the two. I only have a certain amount of knowledge to help get me through it. I really did enjoy it, and I noticed some differences between the movie, which is what I was exposed to first.
Well, I don't have much experience with comic books or comics. I mainly am more towards movies. So reading this comic for the first time was actually quite interesting. Seeing it and being able to kind of take in the story on page rather than on a screen was nice.
The story structure here is different than any origin story, pretty much period, in comics before this. Some people have mimicked it afterwards, but prior to this, the way an origin story in comic book would run is regardless of what issue it would start. Like, for example, Batman doesn't get his origin until the 6th appearance. Superman got his origin, like most, in the beginning. The way they would run it is that you would have Kal-El on planet Krypton. Krypton's going to explode and he flies off and Mom and Pa can't find him and blah, blah, blah. Here, we have the Gathering, where they demonstrate all 4 powers. Then, you have the beginning of the case. They already have the problem of all the atomic plants being sunk by Mole Man. The middle of the story is the actual origin. Then you have the finishing of the case. It's a very unique structure, and I was wondering, Shades, what do you think about that structure?
I'm a simple type of person. I like beginning, middle, and end. You should start it with the origin, go through it, and then end. So it was structured well. It had you interested. It started out with the action of them calling these mysterious quartet together. And then you do find out the origin. One thing you don't find out is how screwed Ben Grimm is.
The Thing was initially intended to be the villain of the piece.
Ooh.
The original outline that Stan Lee did, that he sends to Jack, shows the Thing as the villain and progressing as a villain because Marvel was kind of a primarily monster book at the time. Also, the Thing had a thing for Sue Storm in this. But that was one of the key points that Stan had in the outline that changes over time.
I would have to agree with Shades here on the story structure because, like he was saying, he's a simple man and he thinks, things should start with the beginning and then the middle and the end. But at the same time, I think that for it being the first issue, it's a really good hook and it really does pull you in. It's like, okay, who are these characters? Where did they come from? And then it actually answers that for you, and then it throws more action at you. So can't complain with the structure because it kept me on, the edge of my seat the whole way reading it through.
All right, Ryan?
I actually enjoyed the structure. It was not something that is common. Reading it like that was nice. Seeing it go from starting off with the abilities and all their powers and then going on to show their background, I think is a neat addition.
And there's even a great contrast between the way Ben Grimm deals with being ugly and Harvey Elder, the Mole Man, deals with being ugly. 2 entirely different responses. Even though Thing is supposed to be kind of the heavy, he still stands up and saves the day against the monsters. Doesn't take his wrath out on all of Central City.
You don't find out until later that he can't change back. Unlike everyone else, he's screwed.
Yeah, well, he's totally screwed. Harvey got called, bad names by jerks, especially that one panel where the guy's adjusting his tie and he looks like somebody Ryan just punched. I mean, the guy's a complete loser. Harvey gets mad and decides, hey, I'm going to take this out on everybody by, blowing up all of the surface world. That's a little extreme, Mole Man.
Yeah. All been there, but a few of us have actually blown things up.
On the artwork, Jack Kirby's artwork here is way different from any superhero artwork. It was much more dynamic. They did mimic a couple of times the Justice League panels, like when Johnny melted the auto. Jack would normally do what's called a trip kit, which is like when you would see Sue turn invisible, you'd have 3 panels. You remember that section?
She fades out.
She fades out. Here, he had a couple of huge panels, like when Johnny flamed. That is Justice League mimic. Start with shades.
Well, of course, the Torch is just a ball of flame almost with arms. He's not the Torch that we would ultimately see where there's actually a body image and it's red and it has lines and a flame around it. You draw a little and, I'm jealous. This guy he was good. The best artists, I believe, were John Buscema. Of course, they would show up later. John Buscema, John Byrne, just fantastic artists. I always thought Kirby, was it Kirby? Or
Kirby is the one drawing it.
I always thought Kirby was a bit primitive, but he was a lot better than me. It had you go and you understood clearly what was going on. And like I said, I've dabbled with such things, and it's not always easy to do. Sometimes I would draw something, show my wife, and she'd be like, well, what's happening here? So he had definitely had that gift, and he's a lot better than me. The Thing would eventually evolve into a more rocky, user-friendly type character.
And the unibrow for Thing made him much more expressive later on.
Yes. He had eyebrows, and he had a nose. I don't know. Something about Sue Richards is especially silly. Do you agree with that, Emmanuel? Something a little silly, maybe the hairstyle or something. It fits today, but there's just something a little silly.
Would you say that she's like out of place next to everybody else?
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm looking at. She's either out of place or, I don't know, maybe just... I don't know, I have to think about it, but there's something a little weird.
Jack used to use the magazine models of the day for the hairstyle.
So maybe that's what it is.
So Sue's hair and fashion comes, I'm sure, from whatever Vogue or Look or whatever was on stands at the time.
Reed Richards, kind of an average-looking middle-aged guy. Great coloring, too. Colors are nice and bright and crisp. I like all that. See, I like these panels. Today's panels... They kind of segue into each other. They're really artistic, and I just like panel 1, 2, 3 that they're just lined up, and they're for the most part just squares or rectangles. No, don't show me how artistic you are with your panels, having a big circle here and then a little triangle. Thank you, Ryan, a triangle here or something. So I like that. Like I said, I'm a simple guy. I go back to the Bronze Age before these guys were born.
I believe that the colors are very well done, just as Shade said. The contrast between, the highlights, the shadows. It's a very bold comic. And then just kind of touching on something that you said earlier, Jack, about Marvel being mainly like a monster comic. This is the first time that I've seen that. The handful of Marvel comics I've read, they don't have any monsters in them. And that's because they're the newer editions, newer stuff. Just to have a couple of these monsters here, it's making me think like kaiju stuff.
Kaiju is what they're based on.
Yeah.
In 1956, when Godzilla came to the U.S., Martin Goodman ran into Stan's office, as he often did, and said, hey, new trend, giant monsters, hire some people and get me some giant monsters. Mm-hmm. So if you look at this, you can clearly see the Ghidra representation in the one monster from Monster Island. Mm-hmm. There is a Godzilla-type representation in the stone monster. You see the spines on his back that Thing knocks out. The idea was, if this book failed as a superhero title, because it was so different from other superhero titles, it could still be a monster book. So,
they were just trying to play it safe with that.
I do agree with Shades in that the panels are easy to read and they're understandable. I have seen comics now recently, and they do feel a bit jumbled to me. It's kind of like they have diagonal cuts here and there.
Thank you.
And
Yes,
thank
you, Ryan.
It's very difficult to kind of understand what's going on.
Thank you. Yes.
I do appreciate that it's like that, and the colors, and I noticed that in some parts of it, there are like they represent the characters with
that's true.
with solid colors rather than their normal colors. So I think that's actually really cool too.
We're going to get to favorite character and why, and this time I'm definitely going to participate in the question, because my favorite character in anything is Benjamin Jacob Grimm, the Thing. Followed closely by the Penguin. Don't have Ben's classic sense of humor here yet. The reason why Thing is my favorite character is not evident in this issue, other than the monster aspect of him, but Ben can be anything. You can use him in any story. He's flexible. He can be funny. He can be scary, like he's kind of scary in this issue. Mm-hmm. He can be heroic. He can be petty. complains
Yeah,
about
yeah.
Hulk crushing his pizza-eating hand. He has my favorite singer, Jimmy Durante's vocal speech patterns, which he doesn't have here. Here you've got him saying, "Bah, the world is too small for me." That's not what he would say later on. It'd be like,
Ha-cha-cha. Is that what it is?
He'd be like,
Again, Jimmy
he'd be like,
Durante.
get this door fixed, will ya?
These young people have no idea who Jimmy Durante was. He was, I almost don't know. That's how far back he goes.
Yes,
He goes
exactly.
back a long time.
I'm old.
They all have cool things. I'd love to turn invisible. I'd love to fly. But Reed Richards, he's just so cool because he was just so dang smart. I mean, he was the MacGyver of the comic book world. He could just, figure things out, and he was just so awesome. Of course, the Thing was cool because he was strong, but of course, if I had to have any power, it'd be the Torch. But I just thought Reed Richards was so cool. He was always such a good guy. But my favorite character, I think, is Reed Richards. Power-wise, the Torch. Character-wise, Reed Richards.